All right, Castle here. Today we're going to work on the basic gait pattern training routine. And remember, this is a review video. This is not an instructional video. All right. So the first thing that we did when we were working on this in class was we did a bilateral bridging exercise. The bilateral bridging, start on your back in the supine position. You've got flexed hips and flexed knees, and you bridge up. You push your hips up toward the ceiling. That's a bilateral bridge, all right? As you drop down, you arch your low back. So you push up into the bridge, you drop down, and this is an anterior rotation of your pelvis here, and a posterior rotation here, all right? So this is really, obviously we don't walk like this. We don't walk in a bilateral movement pattern. But this is a great warm-up for this work. Plus, we definitely get our pelvis mobilized so that it's rocking anteriorly and posteriorly. And interestingly, if you feel pain while you're doing this, this exercise turns out to be a great diagnosis or evaluation to see if your lumbar spine can rock anteriorly and posteriorly. So we start out like this. It's pelvic rocking, posterior, anterior, posterior, anterior, all right? Then we're going to add the shoulders to it. When we extend our hips, when we're walking, we also extend our shoulders. So in this particular bilateral pattern, as we extend our hips, we're going to extend our shoulders by pushing our hands down, all right? And then when we anteriorly rotate, we're going to bring our hands up over our head. So it's like this. Might be hard for you to see this anterior rotation, but my pelvis is rocking forward and my back is arching. All right? So extension, flexion, flexion, extension, flexion. All right. Once you get through that little warm-up, we're going to move into things that now start to mimic the gait pattern or the walking pattern. All right? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to stay in the same position. Okay? Flexed hips and flexed knees, but now we're going to alternate. We're going to use an alternating pattern. And that alternating pattern is going to be both bridging and shoulder flexion extension. All right? So remember, in the walking pattern, if we flex our right hip, we have to flex our left shoulder. If we extend our left hip, we have to extend our left shoulder, or our right shoulder. Sorry. All right. So it's going to look like this. All right. Now, as you're doing this, don't get lazy and start doing something like this. You've really got to push up so you're on a single leg bridge like this. And when this hand comes down, you push down with this hand. So we got one leg firing hip flexion, the other leg's firing hip extension. We have one shoulder firing shoulder flexion, the other shoulder's firing shoulder extension. Okay? But we're doing this with a flexed hip and a flexed knee. That's not really how you walk, but we're doing it to encourage the firing pattern and the firing sequence of the muscles that are involved. All right? Okay, so since when we're actually walking, our legs and hips are not flexed anywhere near that kind, to that level. So what we're going to do is we're going to stay supine, but we're going to keep a relatively extended hip and a relatively extended knee and see if we can do this same exercise. Now, when you move into hip extension and knee extension doing this, it becomes a little bit more difficult to do it. And this is a second great technique for evaluating a person's gait as to whether or not both glutes are firing right away. Usually with my clients, right away, they will tell me, oh, my left side, I can't get it to fire, or my right side, I can't get it to fire. So it's a great diagnostic tool as well, all right? But what we're going to end up doing is, we're going to keep our legs kind of pretty much fully extended like this. If you try to do a bridge, I call it a supine bridge, you just push up, that's it, right there, okay? Your hips are only going to come up a couple inches maybe off the mat. That's a supine bridge right there, okay? So now, if we're going to include the shoulder motion, right? Here's a flexed hip, here's an extended hip. Left is extended, right is flexed. So now, let's see, you get that crossing pattern, that contralateral hip and shoulder going. You can see my knee isn't perfectly straight, so that's pretty hard to do when you're laying on a mat that's a couple inches above the floor. But this is the motion. It's a little bit more difficult to do than the bent or the flexed hip and knee technique. But because it's a little bit more difficult to do, it's also a much better diagnostic tool. All right, so that's that exercise, working from a supine plank. All right. The third exercise that we're going to do, we're going to shift now. Okay, that was working in the sagittal plane, which means the front and back plane. Now we're going to move into the transverse plane, which is a rotational kind of a movement pattern, okay? And when we walk, not only are we flexing and extending in opposite patterns, but we're also rotating our shoulders in one direction as we rotate our hips in the other direction. It's just called hip and shoulder counter rotation. All right. So now we're going to take a look at a movement pattern that uses hip and shoulder rotation in the counter rotational pattern. All right. I'm going to shift this around so you get a little better look at this. This is going to resemble one of the stretches in the stretching routine in the beginning, all right? So obviously this is left and right hip rotation, okay? And if I want to counter rotate with my shoulders, when I drop my knees to the right, that's right hip rotation. If I push across like this, relatively speaking, I'm creating left shoulder rotation, okay? Now, if I'm reaching forward with this hand, this is shoulder flexion. You know in the gait pattern, the shoulders work opposite, so I should be extending or pushing down with this hand. And same when I go this way, okay? Hip and shoulder, counter rotation. You can push, use this backhand to push your hips over through those last few inches. You're reaching, you're straining to reach toward the ceiling. Your hand can cross the midline just a little bit, okay? Now we're going to take that pattern And we're going to move in to more of a slow dynamic stretch that's going to run all the way from our hand. It's going to be a crossing pattern, well, not really a crossing pattern, all the way down our leg, right down to our foot, okay? And what it's going to do is it's going to look like this. Right here, right here, okay? We're going to work into that. We're going to start out with our knees and hips flexed, and we're just going to, this was part of the stretching routine for counter rotation, okay? So we're going to start out with this, and then we're going to move to this. Okay, like that. Thing we do is we're going to use a hand weight. So in the beginning, I'm going to start with that hand weight in my right hand. My knees drop to the left. The hand weight drops to the right. Bring it up. Reverse the position. So you're back and forth like this. All right. And say you do maybe 5 of these, 5 to each side. Then you just shift the pattern, if you watch, to being out on 45 degrees with your arm, and your leg is pushing down at about 45 degrees. And then you can even help pulling your arm with your other hand, if you want, to create a little bit more stretch. 2, 3, you don't have to, go just like this, 4, 5, and 5, okay? Now what we're going to do is, we're going to shift back into a bent knee, bent hip position. Like so. We're going to hold the weight right up here, like this, with straight arms. If you bend your elbows with this, you're going to lose the effect. So you start up here with straight arms, just holding that weight. And as you let your knees drop to the left, you let that weight drop to the right, okay? And you start out in a very, just a very short arc pattern, okay? Start to get warmed up. Those keep those arms straight, and then you can start to increase the arc. Both of your knees and your shoulders. It's really your hips and your shoulders, okay? And what you can notice here is this will drop. I'll counter rotate to one side, and I'll get to the end to where the tissue, the muscles aren't going to stretch anymore, and that sort of stops me, all right? And then it rebounds me into the opposite direction, okay? So in this routine, we're calling it part of the gait pattern routine, but we're also using some of the fascial fitness training ideas or rules, okay? So that's the hip and shoulder counter rotation. All right? And that's the basic gait pattern training set of exercises. What we do from this point, from here though, is we get on the track and we get vertical again, and the gait pattern training continues, but that starts to get a little bit more advanced. Anyway, practice this on the mat. It's great for neuromuscular re-education. And remember to use rhythmic application. It means that you could do this almost every day, all right? Don't overdo it in the beginning. Be careful with it. But add this routine into your stretching routine and your fascial fitness routine, this gait pattern training routine rounds out that little trio of training routines. All right, if you got questions, if this hasn't resolved the ones that you might have had after the class, don't hesitate, give me a call. All right, thank you.